Hi everyone, it's Bob here from INSYDIUM. This is Top Tip Tuesday, and on today's video we're going to be looking at particle trails. So, if you've got trails in your xParticles scene and when the particles die, the trails disappear. So how do you get them to animate off or to fade off rather than just disappearing with the particle? That's what we're going to explore today. It's pretty easy. There's a couple of different ways of approaching it, but it's called shrink trails. So let's get into Cinema 4D and we'll start the clock. In our scene then we have a spherical emitter firing out these particles, and we've got an xpTrail object which is referencing that emitter, creating these nice tails. And the reason that they're only this length is that if you have a look in our xpTrail, we have the full scene trail deactivated and our trail length is 30 frames, and that's giving us these nice tails. Let's say we want these particles to die though at say frame 110. So let's go to the XP emitter, to the emission tab, and we'll take off full lifespan and we'll put the lifespan at 110 frames. So now when we hit play, they'll create those trails, and at frame 110 the particles die, but the trails just disappear. And that's because trails can't live without a parent particle. But this looks very abrupt. So let's put our full lifespan back on, and instead we're going to use a modifier which is going to enable us to be able to shrink those trails down. So let's go to our modifiers. We're going to go to our control modifiers, and in here, look, we have an xpTrailsMod. Let's bring it in. So by default, this operation is set to shrink, but this modifier is always on. So if we hit play, the trails are shrunk before they're even born, and so that's not working. If we switch off that trails mod, play it to a point, and then switch it on, say now, and then the trails shrink. So that's pretty cool. So what we're going to do is, to get this to be triggered at the time of our choice, we're going to use a particle question. So let's do that. We'll go to our emitter. We'll go to the questions tab. We're going to add a question. The question type is a particle data because we want to ask a question of the age. So by default it's set to age, which is great, but we could pick, look, speed, radius, all kinds of things. But we're going to do age. And we're going to ask the question every frame, is the particle greater than 110 frames? And if it is, we want it to do something. What is the something that we want it to do? Well, we could add an action here, or we could just come down a bit further. We can activate a modifier. So let's say when the particles are 110 frames, activate our TrailsMod modifier. So let's drag that in there. So now when we hit play, they'll be able to create a trail, but at 110, it's activated and they shrink down. Brilliant. So let's go back to our Trails mod. We can change this if we want. We could get this to expand, to grow, to pulse the length of that trail. So loads of options. Let's keep it on shrink. And we could also increase the interval. Look, so if we put this up to 10, it's only going to shrink every 10 frames. So it's going to take much longer to shrink. That shrinking process, look, it's taking way longer for it to get shorter. It's gradually going down. So we have that control. Let's put it back to 1. Or we could increase the rate of change so it shrinks really, really fast. Look, once we get to a frame 110 and it's activated, vroom, gone straight away. So we have that control in our mod, which is great. Now the last thing is we want actually our particles to die when the trail gets to 0. So we can do that with an action. Let's go to our actions here. So this is going to be an action. When the trail gets to 0, do something. And the something we want to do is to kill the particles. So let's add an action. The action type is going to be a direct action. And the direct action is going to be a change life. And by default, this change life is set to kill particles. So let's have a look. Once these particles get down to 0, you're going to see that our particles are going to be killed. Perfect. That's exactly what we want. Okay, so the Trails mod is a really useful mod, and it's got loads of options to do this shrinking of trails. However, if you just want to shrink the trail and have the particles be killed without having to be able to adjust the rate of change and all the other options, there is actually a quicker way. So let's delete that Trails mod. Let's delete that change life action. but our particle age is still being asked, but now it's just not doing anything. So if we hit play, now we've got our trails and our particles, but nothing's happening. So now what we're going to do is, in this question where we're asking are they over 110 frames, instead of doing that modifier, look, we'll just add a direct action, and the action type is going to be an object action, and we have in here an option of emitter generator. Look, we have a change trails action, so let's click on that. And here we don't have as many options, but look, it says which trail object do you want to change. Let's drag in our trail object. But look, we have an object to shrink trails, an option to shrink trails, and to kill particles when it's at 0. And that's the only option we have. And if we hit play, we're going to get the same effect, but it's a much more simple setup. It's just going to shrink them and kill them. So there we have 2 ways of shrinking trails and then killing that parent particle once it's got to 0.